Open world, I want to talk about fairness in relation to truth, in relation to time. Okay, so every time is situated in a way to act. Okay, and there's two broad orientations of how we arrive at decisions in a given system. One is you unto yourself. What do you feel like doing? Boodle boop bop, skittle dee dee, stream of consciousness, do what you want, alright? Dance like nobody's watching. Hoo ha. It's all about the self and its strangeness. Just doing as you please. But then sometimes we are situated in systems outside ourselves, and we have to figure out what it takes to get what we want. All right, so you're you're sitting, and you notice a giant boulder rolling towards you. Okay, what does it take for you to not get crushed by that boulder? You move. All right, and it didn't matter how you feel. You can't scream out into the cosmos. Why is this boulder doing this to me? No, you gotta fucking move. All right, your feels aren't as important. You have to do what it takes. And these external systems, all right, in the case of the boulder attempting to crush you, that is an objective system that is acting out to physics, because of forces, because of reasons, hand wavy. We don't know why things happen, but they do. Okay, but in social systems, you can kind of see the secret assumptions and kind of pick up on the fact that this person wants to be treated a certain way for me to get the job, yada yada yada. And we can kind of ask in these closed social systems, what makes the system act the way it does, and is it fair? Is it good? Now, that notion of fairness and goodness in the case of the boulder rolling towards you is a little bit facetious. It's not practical. It's not going to lead you to, it's not really honoring the crisis as it is, because there's a dimension of time. For every second in time that you waste, that boulder is rolling closer and closer and will murder you. Which is to say that systems are sort of embedded into a notion of crisis, which comes into play a notion of budget. If you don't have a lot of time, then you can't think about how things would be more fair. You have to think about how do you get out of it alive. And so for every crisis and for every budget, there's a notion of success. But I feel like, if we don't kind of have a notion of self-care and a culture that kind of situates this thing that human beings have a lot, a lot of abilities to get fucked up, and we have to be very disciplined in taking care of ourselves and kind of having an inner garden where we cultivate and understanding the crises of the past. If we don't do that, okay, we're never going to recognize the new terrain. All right, the person that survived the Great Boulder War of 2003, they don't really decompress, and allow themselves to acknowledge, hey, that Boulder War really sucked. They might constantly, anytime they see something slightly round approach them, treat it as a boulder and run away. Okay? And now we live in this time where we're sort of trying to, where there are more factions, more identities, more approaches to how a human being sees themselves in the upper world. And we're trying to be like, hey, I exist, how do you do? And there's this kind of interdimensional bickering where there's a resentment of the recognition of feelings, back and forth, until every good faith discussion becomes unrecognizable from a toddler at bedtime. Okay, so we see the rise of this lexicon of a notion of a snowflake or a social justice warrior and virtue signaling, all oriented towards factions that see themselves in a kind of infinite diversity, meeting with each other and kind of not really giving each other the suspension of disbelief to orient the action to the crisis, to the notion of success. Which is to say that it doesn't matter how you identify in the gender spectrum. When a boulder rolls towards you, you should be judged by your ability to move out of the way of the boulder, right? But a lot of the time, that simple orientation to the crisis and the budget that crisis allows you and your ability to handle it, seeing a self without being distracted by any other labels, we lose that simplistic way of kind of arriving at better understandings of the world, and we kind of just bicker at each other. Because the crises that we individually experience might be emphasized by one dimension of meaning, whether something is good, whether something is true, whether something is beautiful, over all the rest, right? And it's kind of creating these hilarious meta irony where people who want the world to be more fair value the notion of fairness above all others, hence creating the most ironic form of unfairness that we've ever seen as human beings. And we're seeing this now. And it's sad. And it's, of course, situated where social systems have been unfair. But they're not really recognizing the difference between the objective systems that have notions of unequal outcomes because of the brutal true earth versus the social systems that have unequal outcomes because people are being dicks. And we aren't really taking each other in. The feelers, I would like the feelers to sit and ask themselves, do you understand what it takes? Do you understand the formalities and the objective realities of the world? And does that make you feel uncomfortable even thinking like that? Because if it does, really reflect on why, okay, and unpack it. Because I claim that there are objective truths to experience. Not every truth to an experience is objective, but there are objective truths, and there are crises where the objective truth has more priority over the subjective. Okay, and then for the reelers, are you sure you're in the present moment? Are you sure you're really taking in the realities of the present day? Because if you aren't, and you're thinking about the cost analysis of the great, what did I call it? The great giant rock war, where there were just huge giant rocks crushing people because they didn't know how to get out of the way. If you're still in that world, you're going to miss the new reality that has a new budget. So maybe you can take in how someone else feels. And maybe things are unfair. And maybe they can be more fair so that they can be more good and more true and more beautiful. Maybe. Okay? So, that's all I have to say for now. I just want to remind people, hate each other for the right reasons. Right there, I just typed that in. How dynamic is this?